Hello and welcome, dear students. Let's begin with our history lesson number 4, What Books and Burials Tell Us, part 2. So in the last session, we have just discussed about what are Ved, the 4 Veds, and we discussed in detail about the Rig Ved. And I had also asked you to go through a topic which tells about Vishwamitra and the rivers. And then please put an important mark for the box given on page number 36, which tells us about Sanskrit and other languages. So today we start with the next topics. So the next topic that we start is different names for different people or words to describe people. So there are several ways to describe the people, maybe by the language they speak, from the place they belong to, or from their family and community, etc. Now let us see some of the words used to describe people found in Rigved. So in Rigved, as we find different hymns, we also find certain things which tell us about the life during that period. So based on the work the people did, there were two main groups in the past. So we talk about this early Vedic period. So there were Brahmins who were the priests and Rajas or kings. So who were the Brahmins? So Brahmins were the people who performed various rituals or religious rituals for the people. And they were the people who were well versed with the Vedic Sanskrit language, and they were the people who were involved in composing these scriptures. And now who were these Rajas or kings? Were they the rulers like our sultans and the emperors? No. But this, during the period when this Rigved was composed, these Rajas were generally the wise people, the old citizens who had a lot of experience. They were also brave men. Their work was only to discuss the matter in the society. They did not have their own land, nor they possessed any army, nor they controlled anyone, and even they did not collect taxes. So it was just that person was a leader who could guide the people in a right way. And generally, the sons of these Rajas did not automatically succeed their fathers. Because, as I said, this was not actually a kind of monarchy where the son succeeds the father. But if that son was capable enough, he possessed all the qualities and skills to be a leader, then he would be given the charge as a Raja. So let's discuss about the new words, that is Jan or Vish, which were used to describe a group of people or a community as whole. Now the word Jan we still use in Hindi as well as in other languages, which means people. And the other word, that is Vish. So we have a word called Vaishya, which comes from Vish, or Vaishyas who were belonging to the trader communities. Now there were several Vish or Jana which were mentioned by name. And so we also find reference to this. For example, we have Purujana or Puru Vish, which is actually Puru, who was the son of Yayati and Sharmishtha. They were the ancestors of the Pandavas. And so people belonging to this race or this community were known as Purujana. Then we have the Bharatajana, wherein Bharat, the son of Shakuntala and Dushyant, so people belonging to that race and community, they were known as Bharatajana. And then we also have one more, that is Yadujana or Yaduvish. So Yadu is actually belonging to the Indo-Aryan tribes. So Shri Krishna or Lord Krishna, he also belonged to this particular tribe. And that's why the people who follow them or who are the successors of them, they belong to the Yadujana. So again here, by Purujana, Bharatajana or Yadujana, we mean to say that people belonging to different communities were given different names. Now, sometimes the people who composed these hymns described themselves as Aryas. So, Aryas were the people who composed hymns and were generally thought of as spiritual heroes or warriors. They were the noble people. They were precious, that means they had precious thoughts, and they were not the ordinary people. It's also believed that they were the immigrants from some northern part of the world who came and settled down in our subcontinent. And the opponents of the Aryas were known as Dasas or Dasyus. At first, it exactly meant like they were the enemies of the Aryas. But later, the meaning changed according to the work they started doing. So there were sometimes the meaning was related to slaves or even servants of God. So these dasas or dasyus were taken as slaves after wars. So whenever there would be war between two different communities or two different places, the people that would be captured were taken as dasas or dasyus, and they were the slaves. They spoke different languages because obviously they were captured from different areas. They did not have the right to perform the sacrifices or rituals. And then these dasas or dasyus were treated as the property of their owners. So the owners could make them do whatever work they wanted. While the Rigveda was being composed in the northwest of the subcontinent, there were other developments elsewhere. So as we discussed this, whatever things were going on in the northwestern part of the subcontinent, even in other areas, there were different developments taking place. Okay, so before we see what were the different developments, here you also need to remember the word das or dasyus is associated with the male person in the society, whereas if we need to associate it with the women's or the feminine, it would be dasi. So das is masculine and dasi would be feminine, and it meant slaves. Yes, the developments that were going on in other parts of the subcontinent. So it was very important. It is the story of the megaliths or the megalithic structures. So first of all, what is a megalith? A megalith is nothing else but a large stone boulder or stones used to make big structures or monuments. So the process of erecting these megaliths began around 3000 years ago throughout the Deccan Plateau, the southern part of India, the area of northeast and Kashmir. So these stone boulders or constructions with huge stones could be seen in these places, and they are dated back to 3000 years ago. These structures were made out of large stones and they were arranged in an interlocking system as there was no technique about cementing. So in the earlier lesson also, when we discussed about the great bath or the houses constructed in Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, I also happened to share that the bricks used for the construction were fixed into interlocking system, right? Same was followed during this time period. They did not have any mortar or concrete. And these particular constructions or these structures, they were used to mark the burial sites. So whenever a person was buried under the ground, to mark the burial site, they always used these huge stones. They would arrange it in interlocking way. These days also, when we happen to pass by through graveyards and all, we always find a tomb-like construction or a box-like construction wherein cross or some signs are put up. So to identify that these were the burial sites, people used these huge stones. Now the megaliths were found on the surface as well as under the ground. So the dead were buried in those megaliths, along with various things such as pots, which were known as black and red wares, tools, weapons may be made up of iron, stones, even these precious ornaments, skeletons of horses, conch, shells, and so many n number of things. So even this has a reference in our earlier chapter which tells us that these people believed even life after death. And so even when they were buried under the ground, they could people or the archaeologists when they excavated, they could find so many different things which were buried with the people. And these different things which were buried with the people, it tells us the rank or the status of those people according to what things were buried with the people. Now some megaliths had more than one skeleton. So indicating, what does that indicate? That people and animals close to dead might also have been buried in the same place. So maybe people belonging to the same family, the people and the pet animal, or the tame animal which was belonging to that person was also buried in the same place. So actually these burial sites or burial structures of megaliths you could have seen in the archaeological Deccan College of Archaeology, which actually is one of our field visits. But unfortunately this year we won't be going there. But surely I will share some photographs if I have. And in the picture you can see there is in between there is a box like thing, and surrounding it there are the huge stones which mark the burial sites. Now finding about the social differences. So as I said, whatever objects were buried with the person who was dead, so objects found with the skeleton. So maybe archaeologists think that these objects may have belonged to the dead person. So according to what was buried with the person would give us his position, his status in the society. So yes, even in those days there were social differences because wherever we find these burial sites, some had gold beads, stone beads, copper bangles, and many different things. So it resembles that that person was a rich person, whereas whenever the poor people were buried, they were only buried with a few pots. Now, were some burial spots meant for certain families? Yes. These days, we also have different burial sites or cremation sites for different religious or certain families or certain communities. Similarly, in those days, people belonging to the same family were buried in the same place. And then stone circles or boulders were placed on the surface as signposts so that it would easy to find the burial site so that people could return to the same place whenever they wanted to. Maybe whenever they wanted to go and offer prayers at that burial sites, these stone circles or boulders would help them. Maybe they wanted to bury some other person. Yes, they could find the place. Then in your textbook, when you go through the lesson, say on page number 40, there are different pictures given to you. One of which is like an horse equipment, different axes, and a dagger. So these were found at certain burial sites. And so the archaeologists could tell us that yes, people were buried with different kinds of things. So today we have discussed a lot about different words which were used to describe people or communities. We have also discussed about what are megaliths and what was the use of these megaliths, how they were used to mark the burial sites. We've also seen that even in those days there was social difference, and we come to know about it with the things that were buried along with the people. So whatever remains we could find, we could relate that there were social differences. And yes, we also have seen that there were some burial spots which were meant for some certain families, and there were signposts made by stone circles or stone boulders which would help others to identify the burial site. So that is all from my side for today. So till we meet for the next time, take care, stay safe,